It's time for change out there. The world is just so enormously unequal. Wealth and income inequalities around the world is just huge. It's growing as well. Just because we knew what to do, it would have been a social injustice, I think, if we all knew how to make this huge change in the economies and we didn't do it. And we've got this wonderful opportunity where lots of business owners are looking to retire from commercial life. And if we can capture as many of those as we possibly can, there's about 200 million of them around the world that need to exit over the next 10 years. And transition them to employee ownership, then you start to affect wealth and income equality. I think there were two defining moments in terms of this strategy in my life, and they were actually 40 years apart. I was the youngest of three boys, living on a council estate, sleeping on the floorboards, outdoor toilet, usual stuff. Single working mother. We were in poverty. Social impact is also about who owns and controls the benefit of the business. That's the social impact in itself, regardless of what the company produces. Protects the jobs, creates the jobs, benefits the region. There's no negative impact for anybody. Start up your business with employee ownership from the beginning. You're seen as more ethical by the outside world, and you'll outperform those companies who don't have employee ownership that are trying to do the same thing. I think it's really important. If you want to transcend people to support you, then go out there before you're ready, and your purpose of why you're doing what you're doing will be revealed naturally. And the mistakes are the magic.
I'm on a mission to help early stage startup founders. So I'd like to ask you one thing, and that is to subscribe or follow my channel. This helps the channel to grow and in turn to help early stage startup founders on their journey. Stephen Greenwood, welcome to the Fail Wisdom podcast. It's great to have you on.
Hi Paul, how are you doing?
Very good. Now you're the co-founder and co-CEO of Valloop, and I'm really excited to have you on because I really believe in what you guys are doing. It makes for a fairer society, I think. So in a way, you're helping employees to that are living in poverty to come out of poverty. And I'll get you to tell the audience more about that. But just to start off with, just tell us a bit about yourself and Valloop, and what inspired you to co-found Valloop Social Impact.
Great intro, Paul. No, it's time for change out there. The world is just so enormously unequal. Wealth and income inequalities around the world is just huge. It's growing as well. And just because somebody has a full or a part-time job in a business doesn't necessarily mean that they're safe from that either. So as you know, we met in Australia, and you know that my dedication now is to try and change that. I think it's developed over a 25-year period, in effect, where as I've learned about what's possible in the sale and purchase of a small to medium-sized business, and all of the individual components of that, everything's like this jigsaw puzzle eventually came together as a framework for us to make the changes. And it never really sat well with me that when a business owner is looking to retire from a small to medium-sized business, the general advice that they get, Paul, is that they should sell to a competitor. Or a complementary sector, a trade sale. That's the thing to do. And the sort of these genuine retiring business owners who want to retire from commercial life, they're just swamped with these agents that are selling that service. And it never sat well with me because it can take a couple of years to do. Many of them don't complete. It's quite risky because you have to disclose everything to people you've been competing with for 30 years. It's expensive, and and fewer even succeed after the sale to another company as well, which I find quite interesting. Then you think about the people that really matter, and that's the workers. Even if a trade sale was completed, sometimes the business can be relocated. Sometimes it can be absorbed into something far greater. Sometimes jobs are lost, and the region suffers because of the loss of GDP. There's people migration, macroeconomically, socioeconomically, the outcome actually isn't so good. So we worked out a way over 25 years in the transfer of these businesses where the seller receives fair value, no arguments, no hardball negotiation. The employees become co-owners, and they own probably a majority of the shares in the business. Senior employees have direct equity in their own name. The outcome that we've created protects the jobs, creates the jobs, benefits the region. There's like no negative impact for anybody, and the investors get returns that have generally outperformed public and private markets. And because there's so many small to medium-sized businesses around the world that need to, where the owner needs to retire, there's something like 200 million of them. So it's a global opportunity for change. So because we just knew what to do, there was a couple of things. The only way we could deliver the impact at scale was to be a fintech. We're not doing it manually anymore. One of the other co-founders stood up in a board meeting 2019 and said, "We're a fintech." Within 15 minutes, we were on the phone to IBM discussing distributed ledger technology and blockchaining, a very manual system and process. So, what inspired us was, firstly, why wouldn't we? Just because we knew what to do, it would have been a social injustice, I think, if we all knew how to make this huge change in the economies and we didn't do it. And one of my favorite quotes from Warren Buffett is if you're the luckiest 1% of the population, then you owe it to the rest of the population to think about the other 99%.
I love that quote. That's so true, and there is so much inequality, really, in our society, and in a lot of countries, like Australia's. We're not too bad, to be honest. Probably England as well, but it's still there. Like you said, there's people living in poverty all around the world, and this could really, help them to come out of that poverty. And when I hear about all the billionaires and all the billions they've got, and they're all building rockets to go to Mars or whatever. It's like, and then some of these billionaires, they have their employees that aren't treated very well. They're paid minimum wage. It's like, how is that possible? It's just, that sort of inequality is terrible. And so I really applaud what you're doing. Anything that can bring more equality to the world and to people's lives and help the economy and everything at the same time is really something that I'm really keen about. This is not exactly what you're doing, but I do remember once a story about there was a big company owner, I forget, somewhere in Europe, in a poorer country, and had been going for like 40 years, and then he sold the company, and then he shared all the profits from the sale with all his employees. Some of them have been with him for like 30 years. And so if you think about it, they're working there as well. Yeah, they're getting paid a wage, but still they're dedicated to the company. So I think the longer you work there, the more sort of rewards you should get as well. So I really love that story, and anything that brings about equality and is something that I'm really. That's why I wanted you on the podcast, because I love what you're doing. But
Yeah.
just going
It's a
back,
global
so
pandemic, Paul. The rich are getting
yeah,
richer and the poor are getting
yeah,
poorer.
yeah,
There's more people going into poverty than there are jobs created.
yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
that creates so many other effects around the world as well. If people living in
Mm.
poverty, they're much more likely to uprise or do things that are not great, or become violent or whatever it is. Like bringing everybody up to a
Mm.
certain level actually helps society
Right.
to be much more sustainable
Yes.
and peaceful society. So it has so many ramifications. So where does the motivation come from with you, that innate motivation to to do this? And like, is it something from your formative years, or is it something that's innate in you, or is there something that happened in your life? I'd love to know why you are doing this. You're motivated to do this great work.
No, you don't know. I think there were two defining moments in terms of this strategy in my life, and and they were actually 40 years apart.
Wow.
Not many people ask me what drives me, Paul. So
Mhm.
so this is what I think anyway. And these defining moments that were 40 years apart was, um, sometimes you remember where you were when something really important happened, whether it was good or bad. You just remember where you were at that particular time.
Yeah.
And I had one of those. I have one of those moments and it was in 1970, when I was about 5 years old.
Oh, really?
I was the youngest of three boys, living on a council estate. Sleeping on the floorboards, outdoor toilet, usual stuff. Single working mother. We were in poverty. I had this cool toy, and I remember it was an Action Man. I used to love Action Man and Batman and Robin.
Okay.
And the Action Man was in a toy hang glider, and I was running through the fields out the back with this brilliant toy, and I run through the kitchen and into the lounge, and I ran past my mother, and past a coal fire that was burning. Behind the carriage clock on the mantelpiece above the fire was a £1 note. The breeze from me running past with my Action Man lifted the £1 up, the £1 note up, and it floated and it went into the fire.
Wow. Good.
I looked at my mum thinking I was going to get a scolding for that. She went grey. She hung her head down. That was, I know now that was 2 weeks' money for three kids and her in the council estate. She was in work poverty. She had a job, but statistically poor and couldn't afford basics of clothing, housing, education, or food. And so I burnt, 2 weeks' food, basically. 5 loaves of bread, 24 eggs, 3 pints of milk. That's what you could get for £1 then.
Yeah.
She didn't tell me off. She was a victim of this old style ownership where full-time workers are excluded from the upside of the business that they help create, whilst the business owners make millions. And I learned then that the value of a pound was far more valuable than what you could buy with it. I learned then that she was trapped because of that. She felt she couldn't provide. It was devastating for her. She was helpless. There was nothing she could do about it. And that stuck with me. But I didn't know that subject would reappear in 2010. So we were working out how to transition businesses in a more ethical way. I meet one of the big names in employee ownership in 2010, and he starts to educate me about employee ownership. And it all just started to fit into place. I knew the difference it could make if we could work out a way to transition businesses to employee ownership. And whatever happened in 2010, when all of these pieces hang together, I thought, I'm going to dedicate everything I have and everything I know to create widespread inclusive worker ownership, because I felt what it was like for the person who was in that position. So that's you know.
That's an amazing story. And usually there's always some driver from our past that, and that's really, so a pound obviously went a long way in the 1970. It's probably
That's
what
right.
equivalent to £100 or something, I'm guessing. I don't know.
It's all relative, isn't it? And
Yeah.
and the scary thing is, it's worse out there now than it was then.
That's true, and that is scary. And well, it's great that there's people like you trying to do something about it. And so I hope people really support and get behind your fund,
Thank you.
and your fintech, and this can become a real thing, all around the world, which is what I know that you're trying to do, which is fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you for your
So
help and support.
yeah, no, absolutely. I'm such a big supporter. Now, Stephen, as you know, this podcast is called Fail Wisdom. You're obviously highly successful, but it's about learning from failures along the way, because we all have failures, and that's just part of life, part of business, and everything else. And so I'd like you to share like a pivotal moment or failure story from your journey with Valloop, and how you overcame it, and continue pursuing that wonderful vision that you have.
I think the biggest moment where literally everything collapsed and everything failed, in the business that we'd spent probably 10 or 15 years creating, was the moment of the global financial crisis. We'd just got the whole financial ecosystem, the whole system and process, the whole legal system and equity system, everything worked out. All of the individual financial products that are required in order to finance the sale and purchase, and there's 3 of them. We were making real inroads to the strategy, and we built up into 2007, transitioning one business every 2 weeks manually, but one every 2 weeks.
Wow.
And that was really, it was just really starting to happen. Global financial crisis came, all of the financial products, all of the financial sponsors, all just stopped, through no fault of this strategy, but they were all involved in collateralized debt obligations and securitizations, and they all collapsed. All of our strategic partners went out of business. Our business went out of business because the financial ecosystem was absolutely critical to the liquidity of us making this impact.
Yeah.
So that was tough. We had to close down. I was homeless for a while with a wife and two kids, 3-year-old twins.
Wow.
I was signing on.
Really, talk us more through that. So you've got this whole thing running and everything's great, and then massive crash. A lot of people remember that, and then you're homeless. So what were you going through? Like, tell us more about that story.
Yeah, no, it was absolutely wild, and a great time for reflection, because it was clear that it wasn't our fault, and actually when I reflected on the financial products that we were using, they weren't all perfect anyway. The debt product from the banks wasn't perfect. There's technical complications in using it. The equity product wasn't really right in terms of the purpose that people were using the equity for. Other financial products were almost perfect, but not perfect enough. So what we realize is we're going to control these 3 products, and we're going to build them internally to our own group. So we're our own bank, we're our own asset finance lender, we're our own equity house, we're our own insurance provider. So it took us 5 years to work out how to rebuild these products that went missing because of other people, and build them into our own group. So we are the manufacturer of these products, and we will never therefore be let down again by other people's mishaps, and
Okay.
that we can control the entire ecosystem in the group. So the reflection there was, we had to rebuild everything from the beginning, but we built it for ourselves, and we built it much better, in a much better way than it was before.
Yeah, and so okay, so you're on a high, everything's going well, GFC happens, and you're actually homeless. So, um, where were you living at that time? Like homeless, like as in like living with friends, or you had no money at all? And then how did you get back on track as well, and finance everything? And how did that all happen?
Yeah, I had to move out of the house in London.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't afford that anymore. Wife, 2 children. Of course, nothing was going to be happening for a long time in 2008 when the world fell apart. Um, I went to the Financial Services Authority at the time. So, I've got this great financially regulated organisation, but we've got no product. What do we do? And they said, you just have to close straight away.
Wow.
So, okay, well, thank you for your help. And thankfully, my mother-in-law and father-in-law had some space back up in Yorkshire. So scraped £60 together to hire a van, and we went to Yorkshire and pitched up in a little apartment in Yorkshire with the in-laws. That was an interesting times.
Mm.
But I wouldn't let it lie, and there had to be a way, and we needed to find a way. It was our duty to find a way. We knew what to do, and as I said before, it would have been a social injustice not to do it. It would have been harder not to rebuild it than to rebuild it.
Yeah.
So we decided to rebuild it.
And how much effort went in, after everything crashing like that, and then rebuilding it? Like, tell us about that. Like, tell that story about the actual. I mean, you must have amazing resilience and determination, just to keep going like that. So, how did you rebuild it at that stage? Like, did you get some more funding, or how did that happen?
I call it a think tank, and it was a 5-year process in working out how to consolidate all of the individual financial products into one collective structure, how to systemize and blueprint a manual system for digital technology, we needed to test certain systems and processes and certain emotions from business owners and employees, and actually get out there in the marketplace, talk to people and test things and try things. We created a regulated sandbox environment to test certain things. We knew by then that things would work, but we still needed to test it just for everyone's sanity. And then we launched again in 20, and then from 2020, when we decided we were a fintech powered by AI, we built our corporate infrastructure in the United Kingdom, in terms of the holding company, underlying subsidiaries, to plan the global expansion of the Valloop exchange platform to UK, Western Europe, Canada, America, Australia. And that's taken a little bit of time to put together, but we've now got the corporate infrastructure and the entire financial ecosystem for the digital platform to go to the global market, to transition businesses to employee ownership when the owner needs to sell. And that's the alternative to selling to a competitor. You don't sell out to a competitor, sell into the employees, use the Valloop exchange to process the whole thing from start to finish.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. Like, but I used to work out of an incubator here. It was more like it wasn't really an incubator because we had a lot of long-term startups in there, and I was there for like 4 or 5 years. My startup went for 6 years. Unfortunately, didn't sort of make it due to lots of problems, including you had the GFC, I had COVID. There was like lots of different things, and I didn't have a business background either, but. There was one gentleman there, Hong, who had he developed a search engine like a sentient search engine.
Yeah.
And he had the record. He had been doing it for 16 years. Because I used to think, 5 years, and then Hong, 16 years. But it seems like you've had a really long run as well. Getting everything going, and then the GFC, and then another 5 years. So, like I said, you must have a lot of determination, resilience. So I really congratulate you on going through
Like you
all of
say,
that.
maybe it happened that moment, in 1970. Maybe it
I
was that. Like you say, it's strange.
Yeah, that 1 pound burning up
Yeah.
is probably driven you all of your life from the experience from that. It's a pretty amazing story. Yeah, it probably does go back to that, because things that happen, particularly when we're young, really,
Mm,
even unconsciously, influence us so much. Like, for example, I was adopted, and, talking to a psychologist friend of mine later,
mm,
she said, so many adopted kids, they split off.
mm,
Like, I went through school just like daydreaming all the time. So, yeah, that's a coping mechanism. You take it from your mother at birth, and that's how you
mm.
cope. So, that's really unconscious, because you don't even remember it. Or even like, rejection for us is horrible. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
those things like from birth or from early childhood that really affect us. So yeah, I really love that
Wow.
story. And thank you. Thanks to that one pound that now you're, helping people and employees and getting people out of poverty, which is wonderful. So your initiative focuses on societal outcomes in financing SME transition to employee ownership, as you said. Can you
Mhm.
elaborate on the potential impact of employee ownership on reducing the wealth divide and delivering prosperity to millions of people? I know you've talked a little bit about that, but do you
Mm.
want to expand on that?
If you look at the small to medium-sized enterprise as an asset class around the world, the International Finance Corporation reckons there's 600 million small to medium-sized businesses, not micro businesses with under 10 employees, but slightly bigger, more established businesses between 10 and 250 employees, turning over 1 million to say 20 million. They constitute 99% of all of the businesses in the world. They contribute 60% of employment, of all employment around the world, and about 45% of global GDP. So as a collective asset class, it's like the most important. 2 billion workers in this asset class. So the key thing, the nucleus is where can you make the biggest difference, and that's where all of the money is. All of the money is in this small to medium sized asset class. But traditionally, when a business owner has founded a business, and I've done it myself in the past because I didn't know any different, you've got 1, 2, or 3 shareholders who are the founding shareholders. And good stats from the UK recently is 73% of businesses in the United Kingdom are owned by one shareholder who keeps all of the dividends to themselves at the exclusion of the workers who've helped create the dividend. 22.44% are owned by 2 shareholders who keep all of the dividends to themselves at the exclusion of the 100 workers in the factory. It actually works out that 98.98% of all of these brilliantly wealthy businesses are owned by 1, 2, or 3 shareholders who keep all of the dividends to themselves at the exclusion of the 100 workers in the factory. Now, it's not illegal. It's just been the norm over the past 20, 30, 40 years. It's been the norm. But it's time for change now. And we've got this wonderful opportunity where lots of business owners are looking to retire from commercial life. And if we can capture as many of those as we possibly can, there's about 200 million of them around the world that need to exit over the next 10 years, and transition them to employee ownership. Then you start to affect wealth and income equality, because in employee ownership, They have wealth because they've got value in the business itself. So if it's sold, they'll get a lump of money, and they have income because every time a dividend is declared, all of the employees receive a share of the dividend. And they receive it as a bonus in their payslip immediately the same time when the major shareholders declare a dividend. In fact, they may be the major shareholders. So there's this huge upliftment and elevation in their mindset for a start because they have a vote and they're an owner.
Yeah.
But there's also an opportunity to have a long-term, sustainable, additional income stream from the dividends of the business. It's just a whole different ballgame.
And you think that they work a lot harder as well because they're part owners of the business.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, something takes over that academics can't really put logic around. There's this sixth sense that comes over the mindset and the future productivity of the business. Baroness Bowles of Berkhamsted, she's in the House of Lords and she's on our board. She calls it the whoosh effect. The whoosh effect. And I like that. Some people would use the phrase nomological. You know what nomological is, Paul?
No.
It's something that is difficult to explain with logic. It's like a principle of law, but it's not a law, like the law of nature.
Yeah.
That's nomological. It just happens. And what just happens when you transition to employee ownership is the businesses become more productive. There's less absenteeism. There's a greater engagement, higher margin. They're seen as more ethical by the outside world, and they make more money and they pay more taxes.
Look, I'm not surprised because, like, if I put myself in that position, I'd be thrilled. Like, if I was an employee and then, transition over to that, and I'd work even harder. I think everyone would work even harder. They'd be happier as well. Like when we had our startup, we had a really nice culture, and everybody working for us was really happy. We treated them really well, and they just do their thing. We didn't have to say, they just worked so hard and did really well for us, just because we treated them really, really, the way people should be treated. And so, I think it's no, I totally get it. I can totally see why they would do that. Now, your business model, obviously, it's like when business is sold and that all happens. But what do you think about ESOs, employee stock options, like in startups, giving employees stock options? I'm a pretty big believer in that, but I always used to get advice from mentors and people like that say, oh no, be really careful with that. Don't give too much away of that. You should only give like 10% and be very, very careful about it. So that's at the beginning, and obviously, they get like a certain amount, due to performance and how long they're there, etc. But what are your thoughts on ESOs and can they be effective? And do you think it's something startups and small businesses should be using?
Sure. It's a narrow way to create employee ownership, but it absolutely will have some great benefits. Sometimes it's difficult to sell shares to somebody. Sometimes it's difficult if you've got 250 employees to have 200 stock options. The American model is really interesting. The ESOP there, which is a retirement-based structure. So you save up the money for retirement. It's a lovely idea, and that's their version of employee ownership. The European version of employee ownership is more income-based, where it doesn't save up for retirement. It pays the share of the dividend every time a dividend is declared, whether it's weekly, monthly, biannually, or whenever it may be. We have some emerging technology that will allow employees to choose which one they want. That's a democracy for you. But at the moment, the thing that's needed right now is additional income for workers. that's needed now. It's urgent.
Yeah.
And the retirement planning is wonderful. But if I had a choice to deliver more income to the workers now, I'd use the income version. So they started to get share of the dividends now, and they didn't have to wait 20 years before they got the financial benefit.
Yeah, I agree with that. If I was an employee as well, that's what I would want. I mean, it's
Yeah.
good to have retirement money, but yeah, like people need to live meantime. Okay, so when I started this podcast, it's pretty broad. I'm interviewing lots of different startup founders, but I'm really found that I love interviewing people in the social enterprise impact sort of space, and I love their stories and what they're doing. And so, what advice would you give to startup founders who are passionate about creating positive social impact through their ventures based on your experience with Valloop?
Just ask that question again for me, Paul. Sorry, I was
Sure.
distracted by what you just finished off saying before.
Yeah. So, what advice would you give to startup founders who are passionate about creating positive social impact in their ventures based on your experience with Valloop?
It didn't matter how many white armbands I was wearing to show my defense of the working population that were left behind by our capitalist society when I was raising money. They were interested, but it mattered not.
Yes.
We had to work out a way to deliver a profit and deliver returns that were at least the same as what they could get somewhere else. You can't expect an investor to invest in a social impact strategy for a diminished IRR. We needed to get that right first. Otherwise, it's not sustainable.
Yeah, it has to be sustainable. And I've interviewed a few other founders in that area, but there are now some impact funds out there, or social enterprise funds.
Okay.
But talking to someone recently about that, even in that space, their experience was there might be 20 investors there, and 3 of them, they give importance to the social impact, but obviously it has to have sustainability as well, and make money. But
absolutely.
like it's changing a bit. People are finding it more important to social impact, but generally, like most VC funds, and they're after the unicorns, really, aren't they? So it's like, okay, 1 out of 20 or 40 wins and makes $1 billion, and that's where they make their money. But there's other smaller funds, like here in Australia. I've interviewed some people like Cameron Neal from I forget the name. I think it's Funds for Good, and they're helping people in that area where they don't need a huge amount of money, but more than the mums and dads sort of investing, and not as much as the $1 million, angel investors type of thing, and they're helping people in that social impact space. So hopefully there's more and more of that happening out there.
But I'd ask you to reflect on the fact that social impact is not only about making homes for the homeless and food banks and plant-based food, so social impact is also about who owns and controls the benefit of the business. That's a social impact in itself, regardless of what the company produces. And this was a great post by Jamie Broderick, the co-chair of the Impact Investing Institute. That message comes from him.
Yeah,
that social impact is about ownership of a business as well, regardless of what company produces.
Yeah,
and that would have been my other advice, Paul, which is, firstly, you've got to find a way how you're going to deliver a return to your investors, and secondly, start up your business with employee ownership from the beginning.
Okay.
From the beginning.
Yeah.
Put some shares in an employee trust structure or a foundation structure, and anyone needs any help with that, we can help them. It's easier to recruit people as a startup when you start off with an inclusive ownership model. People stay for longer. You're seen as more ethical by the outside world, and you'll outperform those companies who don't have employee ownership that are trying to do the same thing. So
Yeah,
do it from the
that's what I
beginning.
wanted to do with my startup. But all the advice I got is no, you can only do the ESOP and only 10%, and and it's
Yeah.
really complicated, and that's why I didn't go down that path. But that's what I actually wanted to do.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, you've still got time, Paul.
All right, I have to talk to you after this. It's funny enough, it's just like you sort of closed it down. The technology's just there, and then
Yeah.
now I'm getting some people approaching me about it. Even today, it's like somebody I talked to like a year and a half ago just approached me today. So it's just funny how things work, though. I'll have to have a talk to you about that for sure. So, what's next for Valloop in the coming years and yourself? And so what's next in the next 5-10 years for yourself and for Valloop?
We have to get this out now to as many people as possible, and things are the timing is now perfect for this new mission to have a more contemporary and inclusive economy. We are here to serve, of course, the businesses themselves. We're here to serve the business owners who need to retire gracefully from commercial life. We're here to serve the employee workers in the businesses, the regions. We're here to help encourage the employees in employee ownership to think about the environment. It's folly to create an inclusive ownership structure, Paul, generally set up to last for 125 years. So it's an inclusive ownership structure that's permanent. It would be folly to do that if you didn't start planning to be a net zero business. So you have a sustainable business to sustain the sustainable ownership. So there's a lot to do for Valloop to help people understand the benefits there. But as I've said before, now you know the meaning of nomological. Employees naturally start to think about the environment anyway, as when they become a co-owner, because they develop an immediate conscience about it if they haven't already got one. When their future wealth and their future family's wealth is wrapped up in the business that they now co-own, they start thinking about the sustainability.
That's really interesting. So these ongoing effects as well.
60 to 70% of small to medium-sized businesses 60 to 70% of European emissions come from small to medium-sized businesses. The majority of global warming comes from the collection of these millions of small to medium-sized businesses.
That's
COP26 said, we will never keep the planet cool if we ignore SMEs. Mayor Burnham, the mayor of the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, said brilliantly, I think we need a fairer economy first before we have a greener economy.
Yeah, because the flow is agreed upon, as you were just saying.
This is absolutely right, Paul.
Yeah.
We're part of the great transition now. Okay, it's happening now. The great transition is three things. The great transition is transitioning all of these businesses we possibly can to employee ownership and having an inclusive economy. In that state, then we must transition all of the workers that are in work poverty in that working environment out of poverty, and the children out of poverty by sharing the dividends with them.
Yeah.
And the third transition is to collectively transition the businesses that are in this inclusive ownership state to a greener trading, to be environmentally friendly. That's the great transition.
So it's a win-win-win. And who would have thought, 70% of SMEs, emissions come from SMEs, and
Yes.
even the amount of people, like you were saying, that are working in that, like I don't think many people know that, or
No,
I found that really surprising. I would have had no idea. I would have think mainly the big corporations, but it's not. It's not. So
yeah. I'd say 20% of the people I talk to, Paul, see that as the most important thing. Even more important is the cleaning up of the asset class in general than the employee ownership, and I find that fascinating. And we don't talk about it much because our focus is equality, but we don't talk about it enough. Is also my point.
Yeah, absolutely. It needs to be talked about a lot more, so that the more this message gets out there, the better. And I think there's probably a lot of people that feel the same way. So, all right. So, to wrap it up, in your experience, what's one commonly accepted piece of advice for entrepreneurs that you believe is actually misleading or incorrect? And how do you approach this differently?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the first thing that comes to my mind is try not to do too much planning and preparation before you go out on stage. I've learned that to always go before you're ready, always, because your purpose is revealed through action, and I think that's really important. If you want to transcend people to support you, then go out there before you're ready, and your purpose of why you're doing what you're doing will be revealed naturally. And the mistakes are the magic. I've learned that also. Enjoy the mistakes, learn from them. They're definitely the magic. And go before you're ready. I don't think there's any dispute in my experience. Get your business case ready and go.
That's really, really interesting. And I used to belong to an organization. I did some training in that, and their mantra was always, progress is better than perfection. Just get out there and do and learn and make mistakes. And, it's interesting how you say purpose is revealed through action. So that's
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the magnet. That's the magnet for your business.
Yeah, no, that's some really, really great advice. And I really appreciate you, taking the time out and, early over in the UK and a little bit later in the evening here. And really, as I said, I really support what you're doing. I think it's so, so needed. It's really, really important work. And I hope and I'm sure that, you're going to expand and hopefully in many more countries. And this idea really catches on a lot more and helps so many people, like a huge amount of people, like you said, like 2 billion people working for SMEs, and you can bring so many people out of poverty and bring more equality to the world. So I really honor what you're doing, Stephen, and thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Paul. All the best.